This was day one of a high-stakes evidentiary hearing, and it comes months ahead of the scheduled August trial for Kohberger. He could face the death penalty for the brutal stabbing murders of 4 Idaho college students in November of 2022. Kohberger was in court today, surrounded by his lawyers. They sparred with the prosecution, not only about what physical evidence could be presented, but over what words could actually be said in court. The judge ruled today that the terms sociopath and psychopath should not be used to describe the alleged killer, but he cleared the way for the word murderer to be used. Also at issue was whether the audio from that dramatic 911 call should be allowed at trial. It was made by 2 women in the house, 2 roommates who lived there, about 8 hours after the killings. Here's just a snippet of that 4-minute call.
Tell me exactly what's going on.
One of the roommates has passed out, and she was drunk last night, and she's not waking up.
Okay.
Oh, and they saw some man in their house last night. She's not waking up.
Okay. One moment. I'm getting help started that way.
Now, the defense tried to have that audio excluded. They said the woman who talked to the dispatcher the most hadn't actually seen anything for herself. She was making the call. She wasn't in the room where the victims were. So they say that makes what she was saying hearsay. But the prosecution had another take.
This was obviously a startling event, and 2, the statements were made under the stress and excitement that it caused, and that's clear by listening to that audio.
That person is repeating what she's been told. She's not somebody who observed any event in the house.
Ada County Judge Stephen Hippler did not rule on that question today. It's one of many questions that are now before him. For more on today's hearing, Jesse Weber joins me. He's a NewsNation legal contributor and Law and Crime Network host. All right, let's start with that 911 call. You don't just hear one woman. You can hear the hysterical roommate in the background saying she's not waking up. There's a lot more said on that. Do they have any chance of getting this 911 call excluded?
I don't think so. I mean, look, they make a good argument that it's not told, a lot of this recollection, and remember what hearsay is, it's an out-of-court statement offered to prove the truth of the matter certain. If she didn't visibly see this and is recounting certainty, it's secondhand information. But at the same time, this is so important to establish the context. It's important to establish the timeline, right? The timeline of this case. When did the killings happen? When were the bodies discovered? That is a central factor, and I think it's actually going to be one of the first things we hear at this trial, so I can't imagine that the judge is going to exclude it because it's an important piece of information.
They also want excluded eyewitness testimony from one of the roommates that she saw a man in the house that night who had a mask over his face and bushy eyebrows. That's eyewitness testimony.
I take a big issue with this. So the defense doesn't want the idea of bushy eyebrows because this witness allegedly gave inconsistent statements about that. You know what that's called? Questioning her on the stand, cross-examination. You don't make that decision. Allow the jury, the trier of fact, to determine whether or not she's credible. I don't think the judge is going to not allow bushy eyebrows to come in.
Okay, another thing the defense wants excluded is Bryan Kohberger's Amazon purchase history, because a few months before the murders, they say he went onto Amazon and bought a K-bar knife, which is what they believe was the murder weapon, and a sheath for that knife, which is what was found at the crime scene with his DNA on it.
Yeah, I don't, again, I sound like a broken record. I don't see that being excluded as either. That is a very important piece of evidence to establish ownership of these key materials in this case, and especially the timeline leading up to it. Now, you might be saying it's so far removed, it's so many months before, but not really.
Except he then goes on to Amazon a second time to buy another knife sheath.
Yeah.
And the prosecution's going to argue he needed to buy another knife sheath because he left his at the crime scene.
And it's interesting because the defense seemed to abandon the idea that it wasn't his DNA on the knife sheath. Now they're saying that it was planted. They have to be kind of flexible with what's going on. But look, I will tell you, there are certain wins today. I agree with the idea of not being, he shouldn't be characterized as a sociopath or psychopath. Those are charged terms. Those are medical definitions. You can use the word murderer. He's charged with murder. So I can't say that it was all negative against the defense. There were certain things that were in their favor.
Thanks so much for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.